Folks, I would love to get a certain number of people into a room and ride their asses. And the people that I would love to get into a room would be Chuck Grassley, Senator from Iowa, Dianne Feinstein, Senator from California, Bob Goodlatte, House of Representative from Virginia, Jerry Nadler, House of Representatives from New York, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, our current Attorney General, and Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education. And the reason that I would love to get them into a room and ride their asses is because of our current prison complex, the industrial prison complex. As you can see from the note here, or the title here, does the U.S. spend $80 billion a year on incarceration? And the answer is yes, plus some. So exactly what are we getting for our money? Basically, you are taking, millions of people, and you are taking them basically out of the operating system, daily life, and sitting them in prison cells with nothing to do. Now, I'm going to take a liberty here and say that most of us know someone, either a family member or a friend, or someone we know that has been to prison or is currently in prison. And I can honestly say that I have had family members, some of them very close, that have been to prison. Fortunately for me, I have not had the good fortune of being incarcerated. But what is the actual purpose of the incarceration? Someone has committed a crime, or possibly not committed a crime, but been convicted of a crime, and they are given prison time. What's the purpose of giving them prison time? Well, that's the penalty for being convicted of committing a crime. But we've always been told that the prison system is not so much necessarily a punishment, but an opportunity to be rehabilitated. Well, we all know that that's a bunch of bullshit, only because there is no road to rehabilitation. The only road that you have when you go to prison is to serve your time and to get out with as little fanfare as possible. Why do I say that? Well, the U.S. spends approximately $80 billion a year on incarceration. Now, that's not the federal government, folks. Let me break this down for you. The federal government itself spends approximately $8 billion a year on incarceration. The states spend approximately $45.6 billion on incarceration, and your local principalities spend about $26.4 billion in funds to cover the incarcerated. So that totals about $80 billion. Now, for that $80 billion, prisoners are farmed out, for the most part, to for-profit prisons where the inmates basically sit around and do damn near nothing, which leads to a lot of frustrations, altercations, and then additional time. I can tell you at the pay-for prisons located in California and Arizona that inmates basically spend most of their time sitting in their cells. They don't have access to any type of educational facilities. Their physical activity is extremely limited, and the only lifeline they have is from relatives and friends who will either support them monetarily, giving them, you know, something on a monthly, bi-monthly basis whenever they can, and making visits, which serve to boost up the local economies surrounding the prisons for weekends at a time, especially during holiday weekends. Now, our educational system, which is run by Mr. Voss, who is a joke. And if you don't think that I know what I'm talking about, she recently appeared in front of Congress at a House congressional hearing, and she made an absolute fool of herself. And I welcome you to go to C-SPAN, search for Betsy DeVos, and look at the most recent hearing that she appeared at. She got raked over the coals and showed an absolute lack of knowledge or goodwill when it came to various programs, both for disabled people, underprivileged, low-income people, and specifically racial bias within the educational system. She showed that she specifically is a cheerleader for charter schools, and really, if it were up to her, would pretty much destroy the public school system. And I would say to her, how much money are you spending on education for the people that are incarcerated? I say that because a study was done and they showed a correlation between people having at the minimum a high school diploma and their relationship to the incarcerated. And it was found that a huge number, a huge percentage, a majority percentage of people who lack a high school diploma dominate the incarcerated. So an answer to trying to reduce that problem would be, number one, to offer educational programs within the prison system, which would allow inmates, if they chose to, obviously, to obtain a high school diploma at a minimum, and for those who desired it, to go on and obtain credits towards a college degree. That would obviously reduce the recidivism as far as people going to prison, getting out, and then coming back in. But not one dime, and trust me, I looked, and the $84 billion that we spend annually, I couldn't find one dime that was contributed to the education of the incarcerated. So folks, again, I would love to get those individuals into a room and just rake them over the coals on what they're doing as far as the betterment of the people that are incarcerated. Now, in case you need it, the people that actually control what goes down with the prison industrial complex and people that are locked up are the Senate and House Judiciary Committees. The Senate Judiciary Committee has 22 members. The 22 members are obviously Chuck Grassley is the chairman, Dianne Feinstein is the ranking member, Orrin Hatch of Utah, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, John Cornyn of Texas, Mike Lee of Utah, Ted Cruz of Texas, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, Jeff Flake of Arizona, Mike Crapo of Idaho, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, John Kennedy of Louisiana, Patrick Kennedy of Vermont, Dick Durbin of Illinois, Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, Chris Coons of Delaware, Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, Cory Booker of New Jersey, and Kamala Harris of California. So that's 12 Republican members versus 10 Democratic members. In the House, there are 39 members, and I will give you the Republican members first. The chairman is Bob Goodlatte, Jim Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin, Lamar Smith, Texas, Steve Cabot of Ohio, Dara Issa of California, Steve King of Iowa, Louis Gohmert of Texas, Jim Jordan of Ohio, Ted Poe of Texas, Tom Marino of Pennsylvania, Trey Gowdy of South Carolina, Raul Labrador of Idaho, Blake Farenthold of Texas, Doug Collins of Georgia, Ron DeSantis of Florida, Ken Buck of Colorado, John Ratcliffe of Texas, Martha Rolloi of Alabama, Martha Robbie of Alabama, Matt Gantz of Florida, Mike Johnson of Louisiana, Andy Biggs of Arizona, John Rutherford of Florida, and Karen Hendel of Georgia. The 16 Democratic members, ranking member being Jerry Nadler, New York, Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, Steve Cohen of Tennessee, Hank Johnson of Georgia, Ted Deutsch, D-E-U-T-C-H of Florida, Luis Gutierrez of Illinois, Karen Bass of California, Cedric Richmond of Louisiana, Hakeem Jeffries, New York, David Cicilline of Rhode Island, Eric Swalwell of California, Ted Lieu of California, Jamie Raskin of Maryland, Pramila Jayapal of Washington, Brad Schneider of Illinois, and Val Demings of Florida. Those are the members of the House Judiciary Committee. I suggest that you at least send an email, go onto their web pages, make contact with these people in whichever way you can, and let them know how dissatisfied you are about the number one, number of people within our criminal justice system that are incarcerated, and number two, that the claim of rehabilitation is a joke, given the lack of money that is contributed to trying to actually rehabilitate people through, at a minimum, education. Because education would be a big key here, as well as the direction that the country is supposedly going on, where you no longer will have to check the box as far as indicating you have a prior record, which will give you a bit better of a chance of obtaining decent employment. This affects people of color to a major extent, and I just believe that they try to get us into the system any which way they can, either legally or illegally, and then once that occurs, they want to clamp down on us as much as possible. I say that only because I saw a recent article where a white person and a black person both committed the same crime, were of the same age, had the same previous criminal record. The white person, I'm not going to say obviously, but perhaps you should say obviously, received 4 years probation with no actual prison time, and the black person who was convicted of the same crime received 10 years of prison time. So now you tell me, the only difference between the cases, and there were multiple cases that were exactly the same, the only difference in the cases was the fact that the people of color had the hammer dropped on them, while white people basically were seen as potentially decent citizens, and therefore were treated, in my opinion, with kid gloves. Just my opinion, folks.